Okay. Shabbat Shalom, everybody.
Shabbat Shalom.
And we have a wonderful Shabbat lesson as always. And we have two-part Parsha this week. And the first one is called, I just got it backwards here. I'm a little quick here. The first one is called Tazria. She conceives, and that's from Leviticus 12th chapter, 1st verse to the 13th chapter, 59th verse. And the second parsha is Matzora, leper, Leviticus 14th chapter, 1st verse to the 15th chapter, 33rd verse. And before Torah reading, this blessing is usually said, and we usually say it, but we don't usually always record it. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitishanu b'mitzotav v'tzavanu la'asok b'derevei Torah. And the Tazria starts out, Ve'yadav Adonai el Moshe lamor. Daber el bnei Yisrael lamor isha ki tizri'a v'yelda zachar. Vitama'a shav'at yami kimi nedet dota tatma. The Lord spoke to Moses, saying, Speak to the Israelite people thus: When a woman at childbearing bears a male, she shall be unclean 7 days. She shall be unclean as at the time of her menstrual infirmary. And from Leviticus 14th chapter, 1st verse, Ve'yadav Adonai el Moshe lamor, Zot tihye Torah hamatzara beyom taharoto ve'hova el hakohen. The Lord spoke to Moses, saying, This shall be the ritual for a leper at the time that he is to be cleansed.
Psalm 84. How admirable are thy tabernacle, O Lord of hosts! My soul longeth, yea, even fainteth for the courts of the Lord. My heart and my flesh cries out for the living God. Yea, the sparrow has found a home, and the swallow a nest for herself, where she may lay her young, even thine altar. O Lord of hosts, my God and my King and my God, blessed are they that dwell in thy house, they that still praise thee. Blessed is the man whose strength is in thee, and whose heart are the ways of them, who passes through the valley of Baca, makes it a well, and rain also fills the pools. They go through strength to strength. Every one of them in Zion appears before God. O Lord of hosts, hear my prayer. Give ear, O God of Jacob. Behold, O God, our shield, and look unto the face of thine anointed. For a day in thy court is better than 1,000. I would rather be a doorkeeper in the house of my God than to dwell in the tents of wickedness. For the Lord is a sun and shield. The Lord will give grace and glory. No good thing will he withhold from them that walk upright. O Lord of hosts, blessed is the man that trusteth in thee. This is the word of the Lord. Our Father in heaven, hallowed be your name. May your kingdom come, and may your will be done. We give thanks, Lord, for your blessings upon us. And we give thanks for you continuing to provide for our needs and for giving us your Son. We thank you, Lord, for many things. We thank you for your grace and mercy. And we thank you for your word that teaches us that we may live and grow in it. Continue to open the light of your word to us, Lord, that we may grow even more and more in it. And we give thanks for this day that you have made. Not only did you make it, Lord, but you delivered. You delivered your children Israel from Egypt out of bondage and slavery, and gave them this day as a day to recognize their freedom and deliverance. And Christ also has died for us, Lord, freeing us from the bondage of sin and its penalties, and making us free as well. And we join in with our brethren, the Jews, and celebrate a freedom, a day to rest and a day to worship, a day to reconnect with our spirit and to reconnect with you, a day to enjoy the presence of God. This we pray in the name of our Christ Jesus. Amen.
Amen.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, hamotze lechem min sa'at. Blessed art thou, Lord our God, King of the universe, who gives us bread from the earth. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, Berei pri hagathem. Blessed art thou, Lord our God, King of the universe, who gives us the fruit of the vine. Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom. Shabbat shalom. Shabbat, 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 Shabbat shalom. Shabbat shalom. Shabbat shalom. Shabbat, 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 Shabbat shalom. Shabbat, Shabbat. Shabbat, Shabbat shalom. Shabbat, Shabbat. Shabbat, Shabbat shalom. Shabbat shalom. Shabbat shalom. Shabbat, 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 Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom, everybody.
Shabbat shalom.
So wonderful. The Lord has allowed us to come to another Shabbat. And there are a lot of things happening. And let me just say that while I serve your initial course. The 17th of April, if I'm not getting that right, because it changes when it's near the Shabbat. It was the Remembrance Day in Israel. Mm-hmm. And they remember those who have died and have been for the country. And today, well,
was that the thing that I sent you?
I'm sorry.
Was that thing I sent you or no? Something different.
Maybe different. Maybe different. I'm not sure. Maybe different. Maybe different. But also, it's Remembrance Day. Also, this is the 7th anniversary of the founding of the State of Israel, and they're celebrating, I think, from the 16th of April until they may be celebrating all month of May. I'm not sure, but it happened on the 5th of Iyar, which is today, I believe, the 20th. Well, it was yesterday. So it's the 70th anniversary, and they're really celebrating because 70 is a special number in the Torah, and so they are really celebrating. And then in May, I think that's when the U.S. is supposed to move the embassy to Israel. So there are a lot of things going on over there. There are a lot of things just to watch out for in an intro. You don't have to look at the news to know that these are the things that are going on that you need to be aware of, that the ultimate enemy is not pleased that Israel has returned to the land. It's a very interesting thing. If you have time, you should read the story of Theodore Herzl and how he came about. He said he founded the state of Israel again. But there's an interesting story, and I think the guy's name is Herschel. But if you look at Google Theodore Herzl, there was a minister, an Episcopal minister, who was, one day he was at a bookstore, and Theodore Herzl was a playwright, I believe. And so when he went to the bookstore, he saw that Theodore Herzl had written a book on the state of Israel, wanting to find the state of Israel, and this is like in the 1800s. This minister sought him out, and then I guess, he didn't wait for an introduction. He went and sought him out, and he told him, I've been praying that Jewish people would return to the state of Israel, to the land of Israel, as was promised in the Bible. And this guy, this minister, knew a lot of important people, wealthy people, because he had worked for them, and he introduced Theodore Herzl to these people. And they had the first Zionist Congress, which was 1897, I believe. I hope I'm not getting that wrong. And this minister was one of 10 members who were not allowed to vote because they weren't Jewish. He was allowed to go to this first Congress. And so just the way that God returned people to Israel, Herzl didn't see it. He died long before the state of Israel was refounded. But they did move his body to, and they call it Har Herzl, it's a mountain near Yad of Hashem. I say mountain. Near Yad of Hashem in Israel. And there is his grave. And it reminded me of Joseph. When Joseph left, Joseph reminded Israel, said, when you leave, take my bones with you. And they went and got Theodore Herzl. But it is really an inspiring story that this one man, God used this one man to get the Jewish people back to Israel. Now, all we're concerned about is that Israel returned to the land. And God promises in his word that all of the Jewish people, all of those who say they are of Israel, are going to be going back to the land. You have no choice, because that's what God says. So this is an exciting time, this 70th anniversary of the founding of Israel. That number 70, where do you remember that number is found in the Torah?
70?
70.
I can't remember the verse. I think I read it before.
What circumstance? You don't have to remember the verse. Where is that number most prevalent? Probably jumped out at you.
The number of years of a human life?
Yes, but also it's to do with Israel. Yes, that too. But
70 elders?
Yes, and also remember when they counted all the people that went down to Egypt.
Egypt, yeah, okay.
Of the descendants of Jacob or Israel, there were 70. So this is a very momentous occasion. All right, and so now we are going to again. We're talking about last week the Kohen and the Kohen finishing the ordination and some of the rules that are required, that God is saying, this is what I need you to do so that I can draw close to you. So this. The first part, I think we'll do the first part, Tazria, then we'll have a break. She conceives. And these are the purity, things on purity. And so the first, John, if you want to do from Leviticus 12th chapter, verse 1 through 8.
Okay.
Because it's in my Torah, let me just tell you, it's divided into 3 sections. And let me just tell you what they are first. Defilement through childbirth, Leviticus 12th chapter, 1st through the 8th verse. Then defilement through tazka'at, Leviticus 13th chapter, 1 through the 46th. That's a skin condition. And tazra'at of garments, Leviticus 13th chapter, 47 to the 59th verse. So if you want to do 12th chapter, start us out. That would be great.
And the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, Speak unto the children of Israel, saying, If a woman have conceived seed, and bore a male child, then she shall be unclean 7 days, according to the days of separation. For her infirmity shall she be unclean. And in the 8th day, the flesh of his foreskin shall be circumcised, and she shall then continue in the blood of her purifying 3 and 30 days. She shall touch no hallowed thing, nor come into the sanctuary until the days of her purification be fulfilled. But if she bear a maid child, then she shall be unclean 2 weeks, as in her separation, and she shall continue in the blood of her purifying 66 days. And when the days of her purifying are fulfilled, for her son or her daughter, she shall bring a lamb of the first year for a burnt offering, and a young pigeon or a turtle dove for a sin offering, unto the door of the tabernacle of the congregation, unto the priest, who shall offer it before the Lord and make an atonement for her, and she shall be cleansed from her issue of her blood. This is the law of her that have bore a male or female. And if she be not able to bring a lamb, then she shall bring 2 turtle doves or 2 young pigeons, the one for the burnt offering and the other for a sin offering. And the priest shall make an atonement for her, and she shall be clean. My thinking on this, I think some of the words that translated give not quite an accurate impression. I suppose when they initially wrote it, they knew exactly what they intended, but over time words change their meaning, and it gives the idea the lady is unclean after having a child. Mm-hmm. Well, the idea is the unclean or the purifying part that I'd like to talk about, and it's not that she's unclean because she did something wrong. For instance, what has happened, if she has a child, she has carried 2 souls within her body, an extra person inside of her body, at least one, for 9 months. So at the end, when the child is born, she loses 1 soul, which means she's incomplete, because she's lost 1 soul, and that's what the problem is. She is not spiritually aligned anymore, and that is what has to be reconciled back to. What has happened is how should I put it? A loss has happened, mm-hmm. and restoration has to occur, restoring her body and soul back to one person's body and soul. The purification, and I'm going to use the same word because I think you can understand me better when I say it. The purification for a male child is less than for a female, because a female is greater. In what respect, I forgot, I'm losing offhand. But in a sense, the responsibility of a female or a female child is greater than that of a male child. So that's why the purification is less. Purification time is less or more for a female child. And what is being done, there's an atonement that's being made that is designed to reconcile body and spirit back together, or we can say a restoration. But that's primarily what I have on this part. The circumcision that happens on the 8th day, we were just studying last week where the 8th day was the day that the temple was dedicated. And there's some additional significance with this circumcision on the 8th day, and I'm losing my train of thought as to what it is, but hopefully it'll come to me again before we're done.
Okay.
But so the floor is open for other inputs on this.
The only other one that I had, and I don't have a one of the reasons that some of the teachers gave for the purification time for after the woman has a little girl is longer, because it said the girl herself one day will have a menstrual cycle. She will, blood will be involved, and so that's why it was double time of the for purification for the girl. And then, but then another for the sin offering, another teacher said, well, she's making expiation because of the pain of childbirth. She may have said, I'm never going to let my husband come near me again. So she's making an atonement for having said that. So we know that it is something different. She has a girl, so there were many, I guess, explanations as to why, but there certainly is something different once she does have that girl.
Well, one of the thoughts, some have asked, why aren't women circumcised like men? And I guess one of the explanations is the primary thing that goes on in circumcision for a man is they lose blood, but women actually lose blood when they give birth and also during their regular menstrual cycle. So they do lose blood, and technically the women lose their blood during their regular menstrual cycle or during childbirth. So essentially doing childbirth would accomplish the same thing, or would have the same principle as it is when a man is circumcised.
And probably it all comes down to the fact that blood is being what's the word I want? Blood is being
taken from the body.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Blood is being taken from the body.
Well,
and so, and I'm talking about for women, especially during menstrual cycle, because as we get on, we'll find out that during the menstrual cycle, there's definitely a different thing here going on, and it's because of the blood. And they said because the blood carries the life, that's why the blood is sacred in a sense.
Right. More so, during the menstrual cycle, what happens is that the potential of life did not occur, and that's why part of the reason why a woman needs to be purified or reconciled back, because the potential is there, but the life didn't occur. So even when during this menstrual cycle, there is blood, but the blood represents life that's potential that did not happen.
And the blood's almost for the ladies, it's recycled.
Yeah.
So it's pushing out the bad, bringing in new.
Right.
Like
Or
filtered, like a
Exactly.
filter.
Exactly.
well, the body gets ready.
Mhm.
I guess. I'm hopefully you're probably going to say he doesn't know what he's talking about, and that's probably true. But I'm going to say the body pushes blood to the uterus with the anticipation of an egg coming down
Right.
to fertilize it. But when it realizes it's not going to happen, it gets rid of
Get rid
just
of
gets
it.
rid of it.
Hmm.
And that's the potential life that could have happened, but didn't happen. And that's one of the reasons for the purification why it's done. At least that's part of the thinking.
When you think about it, it's a very holy thing that happens. We take it for granted because it happens so frequently, happens every
Right.
month.
Right.
And then you kind of take it for granted. And you take it for granted, number one, because if you really saw how holy this is, we wouldn't have the laws to legalize abortion.
Yeah.
But here's something holy, and really, just when you look at it here, the way God is putting this is a holy thing here, that no man can create or make a baby or anything like that. God designed a system where a baby can be born, and what abortion does, it deliberately kills that life that has been created. And so this is a very holy thing, and it's related, I think, to the temple.
I think it's when I thought of this, I thought of one other thing. When the temple could be a good example, but when I think it was Paul that says, "All of our righteousness is just like filthy
rags."
And I'm thinking, filthy rag refer to a menstrual garment, and what that contains is it's actually death.
Yes.
It's the potential
Yes.
of doing good, and it's dead.
Yes.
And our righteousness is nothing but death.
Yes.
I don't know if that relates to this or not, but I did think of it.
That's why, again, we're going to read that. That's why while the woman's cycle is going on, she is the word in Hebrew. I'm not going to pronounce it right, but she's separated. She's separated from her husband, and we'll go and read that. But she's separated because a death has occurred.
Right.
That potential for life has occurred. So just like when the priests were told that they couldn't touch anything that had died, they couldn't do it because they were holy. Again, that kind of points at what happens to a woman when she can't, and no one can touch her. Supposedly, no one can touch her. Anything that she sits on or whatever, no one's supposed to touch her husband, especially. So we'll go on and we'll find that out. Okay, the second part of Tazria is Leviticus 13, chapter 1, verse 1 through 46. And I'll read that, and then, because that's kind of short. And then the last part, Tazria of the garment. Do you think you can do that one, Barry? Leviticus 13, chapter 47 through 59. It's very short. And now, okay. So the Lord spoke to Moses and Aaron, saying, when a person has on the skin of his body a swelling, or rash, or discoloration, it develops into a scaly affection on the skin of his body, it shall be reported to Aaron the priest, or to one of his sons the priest. The priest shall examine the affection on the skin of his body of the body, and if hair in the affected patch has turned white, the affection appears to be deeper than the skin of his body. It is a leprous affection. When the priest sees it, he shall pronounce him unclean. But if it is a white discoloration on the skin of his body, which does not appear to be deeper than the skin, and the hair in it has been turned white, the priest shall isolate the affected person for 7 days. On the 7th day the priest shall examine him, and if the affection has remained unchanged in color, and the disease has not spread on the skin, the priest shall isolate him for another 7 days. On the 7th day the priest shall examine him again. If the affection has faded and has not spread on the skin, the priest shall pronounce him clean. It is a rash. He shall wash his clothes, and he shall be clean. But if the rash should spread on the skin after he has presented himself to the priest, and been pronounced clean, he shall present himself again to the priest. And if the priest sees that the rash has spread on the skin, the priest shall pronounce him unclean. It is leprosy. When a person has a scaly affection, it shall be reported to the priest. If the priest finds on the skin a white swelling, which is turned some hair white, with a patch of undiscolored flesh in the swelling, it is chronic leprosy on the skin of his body, and the priest shall pronounce him unclean. He need not isolate himself, for he is unclean. But if the eruption spreads over the skin so that it covers all of the skin of the affected person, from head to foot, wherever the priest can see, if the priest sees that the eruption has covered the whole body, he shall pronounce the affected person clean. He is clean, for he has turned all white. But as soon as undiscolored flesh appears in it, he shall be unclean. When the priest sees the undiscolored flesh, he shall pronounce him unclean. The undiscolored flesh is unclean, it is leprosy. But if the undiscolored flesh again turns white, he shall come to the priest, and the priest shall examine him. If the affection has turned white, the priest shall pronounce the affected person clean. He is clean. When an inflammation appears on the skin of one's body and it heals, and a white swelling or a white discoloration streaked with red develops where the inflammation was, he shall present himself to the priest. If the priest finds that it appears lower than the rest of the skin, and that the hair in it has turned white, the priest shall pronounce him unclean. It is a leprous affection that has broken out in the inflammation. But if the priest finds that there is no white hair in it, and is not lower than the rest of the skin, and it is faded, the priest shall isolate him for 7 days. If it should spread in the skin, the priest shall pronounce him unclean. It is an affection. But if the discoloration remains stationary, not having spread, it is the scar of the inflammation. The priest shall pronounce him clean. When the skin of one body sustains a burn by fire, and the patch from the burn is a discoloration, either white streaked with red or white, the priest shall examine it. If some hair has turned white in the discoloration, which itself appears to go deeper than the skin, it is leprosy that has broken out in the burn. The priest shall pronounce him unclean. It is a leprous affection. But if the priest finds that there is no white hair in the discoloration, and that it is not lower than the rest of the skin, and it is faded, the priest shall isolate him for 7 days. And on the 7th day, the priest shall examine him. If it has spread in the skin, the priest shall pronounce him unclean. It is a leprous affection. But if the discoloration has remained stationary, not having spread on the skin, and it is faded, and it is a swelling from the burn, the priest shall pronounce him clean, for it is the scar of the burn. If a man or a woman has an affection on the head or in the beard, the priest shall examine the affection. If it appears to go deeper than the skin, and there is thin yellow hair in it, the priest shall pronounce him unclean. It is a scaly eruption in the hair or beard. But if the priest finds that the scale affection has not appeared to go deeper than the skin, yet there is no black hair in it, the priest shall isolate the person with the scale affection for 7 days. On the 7th day, the priest shall examine the affection. If the scale has not spread and no yellow hair has appeared on it, and the scale does not appear to go deeper than the skin, the person with the scale shall shave himself, but without shaving the scale. The priest shall isolate him for another 7 days. On the 7th day, the priest shall examine the scale. If the skull has not spread on the skin and does not appear to go deeper than the skin, the priest shall pronounce him clean. He shall wash his clothes, and he shall be clean. If, however, the scale should spread on the skin after he has been pronounced clean, the priest shall examine him. If the skull has spread on the skin, the priest need not look for yellow hair. He is unclean. But if the scale has remained unchanged in color, and black hair has grown in it, the scale is healed. He is clean. the priest shall pronounce him clean. If a man or woman has the skin of the body streaked with white discolorations, and the priest sees that the discoloration on the skin of the body are of dull white, it is a tetter, broken out on the skin, he is clean. If a man loses the hair of his head and becomes bald, he is clean. If he loses the hair on the front parts of his head and becomes bald at the forehead, he is clean. But if a white affection streaked with red appears on the bald part in the front or at the back of the head, it is a scaly eruption that is spreading over the bald part in the front or at the back of the head. The priest shall examine him. If the swollen affection on the bald part in the front or the back of his head is white streaked with red, like the leprosy of body, skin, and appearance, the man is leprous, he is unclean. The priest shall pronounce him unclean, he has the affection on his head. As for the person with a leprous affection, his clothes shall be rent, his hair shall be left bare, and he shall cover over his upper lip, and he shall call out, Unclean, unclean. He shall be unclean as long as the disease is on him. Being unclean, he shall dwell apart. His dwelling shall be made outside the camp. Quite specific on what the priest has to look for, and I think maybe John, you have more on this than I do. I mean, it's pretty. The priest knows what to look for, and while he's examining whether there's leprosy involved. John?
Well, let me maybe start at the beginning. And I think my understanding, the translators kind of got this wrong. Mm-hmm. At least the name of it wrong, but we use the name leprosy throughout, and then everyone's gotten used to it. So this is another one of those words that really doesn't mean what it meant at the beginning. Mm-hmm. But leprosy is not a disease. At least the leprosy that we're talking about in this Bible here is not a disease. Because if it was a disease, they'd go to the doctor. They wouldn't go to the priest. Mm-hmm. The priest handles, unless you want to call it a disease of the spirit, not physical disease of the body. But what this is a problem with the man's spirit or his soul, mm-hmm. not with some physical disease of his body. As I said, if it were a disease, he would go see a doctor and not the priest. Not the priest. Also, what we're seeing here, that I made a note that man, as man, we are part physical and we're part spiritual. So when God created man from the dust of the ground and blew into his nostrils the breath of life, he blew into man's nostril part of himself. Mm. So we live in two worlds. We live in a spiritual world and we live in a physical world. And what is happening here, why this person is leprous, is because of some evil speak that he has done against one of his fellow Jews.
As Miriam did against Moses.
As Miriam did against Moses, yes. Mm-hmm. And what has happened, it has damaged the soul. And what is supposed to happen, the person is supposed to realize this error by being left alone or being exiled from the camp. Mm-hmm. He's being put into the same situation he's done with someone else. Mm-hmm. When we speak of evil speak, we can think of libel, mm-hmm. Slander. Slander mm-hmm. would be a better word for it. Mm-hmm. And when you slander someone, you basically destroy that person. Mm-hmm. Some have said that evil speak or slander is worse than adultery and murder and a few other things combined. But what is happening here is that an individual is being slandered, and God is giving you, or God is whispering to you, a wake-up call to not speak like that. So this leprosy or this disease is a physical manifestation of a spiritual problem.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a wake-up call for you to correct that behavior. And when the person calls out unclean, unclean, basically is calling out for them to pray for him, so he can correct his behavior and be reunited in the community. So this is pretty much what's going on here. We haven't gotten to it yet, but there's a gradual progression here. I think we've just talked about the skin in this part so far,
Mm-hmm.
but it could be in the guy's building,
Right.
where his dwelling or his home.
Right.
It could be in his clothes. It
Right.
could be in the furniture, stuff he sits on. So it can be very bad. My understanding is this only happened during the time of the first temple.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't happen nowadays. It doesn't pertain to anything nowadays.
Mm-hmm.
If it did, everyone would be outside the camp. No one would be inside the camp because of slander.
Mm-hmm.
And if you think of the hard things people say to each other on Facebook and Twitter and I don't know, even through email, we just couldn't survive in a world like that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if God would try and correct us, we'd all have those leper spots on us.
Well, maybe we do, and I mean,
All right, so, but it's more for the first temple and only pertained to the Jews, and they say this was the generation of knowledge because they had it everything. Oh, they were supposed to be a beacon of light to the rest of the world, and you know, if they couldn't fulfill it, then what good is it going to do for the rest of us to be struck down with leprosy? We wouldn't get that either. So, as I said, it's a physical manifestation of a spiritual problem.
prime example, Miriam,
Yes, Miriam,
when they spoke against Moses.
Stokeland, right. Now, I think Moses did use that as a sign when he went to Pharaoh.
Yes.
So it makes you want to say, well, you know, Pharaoh, you got a spiritual problem here. Now, maybe use the same word, because when the Egyptians saw it, they were afraid, and they saw it as leprosy as well. So maybe that one was the case of real leprosy, because they didn't have priests at that time to diagnose it. But maybe not. Maybe not. Be interesting.
Okay. And we'll finish up this section with Tazria of garments in Leviticus 13th chapter, verse 47 through 59. There's about 12 verses. So Barry, if you could help us out there, we'd appreciate it.
And if the plague be greenish and reddish in the garment or the skin, either in the wrap or in the woofs, or in anything of the skin, it is a plague of leprosy, and shall be showed unto the priest, showed unto the priest. And the priest shall look upon the plague, and shut up it that hath the plague 7 days. And he shall look on the plague on the 7th day. If the plague be spread in the garment, either in a wrapped or in a woof, or in skin, or in any work that is made of the skin, the plague is furting leprosy, it is unclean. He shall therefore burn the garment, whether wrapped or wove, in a woven or linen, or anything of skin, wherein the plague is, for it is feathered leprosy, it shall be burnt in the fire. And if the priest shall look, and behold, the plague be not spread in the garment, either in the wrap, or in the wolf, or in anything of the skin, then the priest shall command that they wash the thing wherein the plague is, and he shall shut it up 7 days more. And the priest shall look on the plague after that it is washed, and behold, if the plague have not changed its color, and the plague be not spread, it is unclean. Thou shalt burn it in the fire. It is furted in inward, whether it be bare within or without. And if the priests look, and behold, the plague be somewhat dark after the washing of it, then it shall rend it out of the garment, or out of the skin, or out of the wrap, or out of the wolf. And if it appears still in the garment, either in the wrap, or in the wolf, or in anything skin, it is spreading plague. Thou shalt burn that wherein the plague it is with fire. In the garment, either wrap, a wolf, or whatsoever things of the skin it be, which thou shalt wash. If the plague be departed from them, then it shall be washed the second time, and it shall be clean. This is the law of the plague of leprosy, in a garment of woven of linen, either in the wrap or the wolf, or anything of the skin, to pronounce it clean or to pronounce it unclean.
Oh, okay, thank you, Barry. Appreciate that. And that's fairly straightforward. Unless you have something, y'all have something.
No, this is just a continuation about other things. This malady or disease camp will display in. So it's not just going to stop in the person; it's going to surround everything he comes in contact with.
Right.
But that's what slander and evil speak does. It doesn't affect you or the other person.
Right.
It affects the community as well.
Right. Exactly.
So he's being separated, so he gets to feel what it's like to be slandered by isolating him.
Like the Amish people call it, they call it shunt.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's right. That's right.
If someone in the community
That's
does
right.
something wrong,
Yeah.
they break their so-called law.
Yeah.
They shunt them.
That's right.
Or they kick them out.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. That has an effect, doesn't it? I mean, therefore sin won't spread in the community then if you do that.
Yeah.
That's a very good example. Very good example. Because I think that's what we've allowed to happen in our society. You know, you accept one bad thing, one wrong thing, and then it just slowly eats at the community unless you deal with it. And you keep accepting another bad thing, and eventually the whole community could be affected.
That's correct. Yeah.
And it's just like they said, one bad apple spoils a bunch. That is very true with any bad fruit. If you have fruit and let one start
Deteriorating.
and it deteriorates the others, right?
The juice goes into the others.
Yes, and without fail,
And ruins it.
and ruins the whole bunch. Yes, so that's a good example, very good example. All right, we're going to have our break right now, and then we'll proceed on with the second parasha, Matzora, leper, and that's pretty. Basically, as John said, we have not necessarily been talking about leprosy.
No, not the disease leprosy, but as more of a spiritual ailment that shows up in the skin and your clothes and a number of other things too.
As a result of sin.
As result of slander, yes.
Specifically slander.
Slander and evil speak, yes.
Okay. Very good.
Yeah, because, let's face it, we're going.
Alright. When y'all finish eating, I'm going to go ahead and start to read Metzora, the leper. And we'll start, and it's divided into 3 parts in my Torah. The first part is from Leviticus 14th chapter, 1st verse to the 15th chapter, to the 32nd verse, I'm sorry. Leviticus 14th chapter, 1 through 32, purification from Tetzara'at. And then the second part is Tetzara'at of the house, Leviticus 14th chapter, 33rd verse to the 57th verse, and defilement by discharge from the sex organs, Leviticus 15th chapter, verse 1 through 33. The Lord spoke to Moses, saying, "This shall be the ritual for a leper at the time that he is to be cleansed. When it has been reported to the priest shall go outside the camp. If the priest sees that the leper has been healed of his scaly affection, the priest shall order 2 live clean birds, cedar wood, crimson stuff, and hyssop to be brought for him who is to be cleansed. The priest shall order one of the birds slaughtered over fresh water in an earthen vessel, and he shall take the live bird along with the cedar wood, the crimson stuff, and the hyssop, and dip them together with the live bird in the blood of the bird that was slaughtered over the fresh water. He shall then sprinkle it 7 times on him who is to be cleansed of the eruption, and cleanse him, and he shall set the live bird free in the open country. The one to be cleansed shall wash his clothes, shave off all his hair, and bathe in water. Then he shall be clean. After that he may enter the camp, but he must remain outside his tent 7 days. On the 7th day he shall shave off all his hair, of head, beard, and eyebrows. And when he has shaved off all his hair, he shall wash his clothes and bathe his body in water. Then he shall be clean. On the 8th day he shall take 2 male lambs without blemish, 1 ewe lamb in its first year without blemish, 3/10 of a measure of choice flour with oil mixed in for a meal offering, and 1 log of oil. These shall be presented before the Lord, and the man to be cleansed at the entrance of the tent of the meeting, by the priest who performs the cleansing. The priest shall take one of the male lambs and offer it with the log of oil as a guilt offering. He shall wave them as a wave offering before the Lord. The lamb shall be slaughtered at the spot in the sacred area where the sin offering and the burnt offering are slaughtered. For the guilt offering, like the sin offering, goes to the priest. It is most holy. The priest shall take some of the blood of the guilt offering, and the priest shall put it on the ridge of the right ear of him who is being cleansed, and in the thumb of the right hand on the big toe of his right foot. The priest shall then take some of the log of oil and pour it into the palms of his own left hand, and the priest shall dip his right finger in the oil that is in the palm of the left hand, and sprinkle some of the oil with his finger 7 times before the Lord. Some of the oil left in his palm shall be put by the priest on the ridge of the right ear of the one being cleansed, and on the thumb of his right hand, and on the big toe of his right foot, over the blood of the guilt offering. The rest of the oil in his palm the priest shall put on the head of the one being cleansed. Thus the priest shall make expiation for him before the Lord. The priest shall then offer the sin offering and make expiation for the one being cleansed of his uncleanness. Lastly, the burnt offering shall be slaughtered, and the priest shall offer the burnt offering and the meal offering on the altar, and the priest shall make expiation for him. Then he shall be clean. If, however, he is poor, and his means are insufficient, he shall take 1 male lamb for a guilt offering, to be waved in expiation for him. 1/10 of a measure of choice flour with oil mixed in it for a meal offering, and a log of oil, and 2 turtle doves or 2 pigeons, in which are within his means, the one to be the sin offering, the other to be the burnt offering. On the 8th day of his cleansing he shall bring them to the priest at the entrance of the tent to the meeting before the Lord. The priest shall take the lamb of guilt offering and the log of oil and wave them as a wave offering before the Lord. When the lamb of guilt offering has been slaughtered, the priest shall take some of the blood of the guilt offering and put it on the ridge of the right ear of the one being cleansed, and on the thumb of the right hand, and on his big toe of his right foot. The priest shall then pour some of the oil into the palm of his own left hand, and with the finger of his right hand the priest shall sprinkle some of the oil that is in the palm of his left hand 7 times before the Lord. Some of the oil in his palm shall be put by the priest on the ridge of the right ear of the one being cleansed, and on the thumb of the right hand, and on the big toe of his right foot, over the same places as the blood of the guilt offering. And what is left of the oil in his palm, the priest shall put on the head of the one being cleansed, to make expiation for him before the Lord. He shall then offer one of the turtle doves or pigeons, depending on his means, whichever he can afford, the one as a sin offering, the other as a burnt offering, together with the meal offering. Thus the priest shall make expiation before the Lord for the one being cleansed. Such shall be the ritual for him who has a scaly affection and whose means for his cleansing are limited. Very straightforward, but on the other hand, complicated, but what it indicates to me is God is very serious about sin.
Mm-hmm.
And there has to be an expiation for it. It is very serious. He's very methodical in what has to be accomplished. And that's what I got out of it. That it is a very there has to be an expiation for sin.
Mm-hmm. And it can't be overlooked, and just can't be swept under the rug.
Right, it has to be dealt with.
Okay.
Has to be dealt with.
Yeah. A lot of work for the priest.
Yes, yes, a lot of work in the sense of making sure you do it right.
Mm-hmm.
That you are doing it as God says to do it. Can't be done any kind of way.
Right.
So.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Anything else?
No, I just said it was fairly straightforward, the process that they're going through.
Mm-hmm.
Some may say, well, the idea of making offerings using animals, some folks may object to.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes I wonder why, because animals are killed and eaten every day.
Mm-hmm.
But the part of the process is to show that we are above the animals.
Exactly.
And it's an idea of elevating us above the animals.
Exactly.
When we slander one another, we fall below them.
Mm-hmm.
But here, that idea here is not that God is bloodthirsty. It's just a process of showing us that we are above the animals.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
But,
all right. Well, before you take another bite, I'm going to have you do the next part, which is called Tazria of the houses, and that's Leviticus 14th chapter, 33rd through the 57th verse.
okay.
I'll have you read that.
Okay.
And
Right. And the Lord spake unto Moses and unto Aaron, saying, When ye be come unto the land of Canaan, which I give to you for a possession, and I put the plague of leprosy in the house of the land of your possession, and he that owneth the house shall come and tell the priest, saying, It seems to me there is as it were a plague in the house. Then the priest shall command that they empty the house before the priest, go into it and see the plague, that all that is in the house be not made unclean. And afterward the priest shall go in to see the house. And he shall look on the plague, and behold, if the plague be in the walls of the house, with hollow streaks, greenish or reddish, which in sight are lower than the wall, then the priest shall go out of the house to the door of the house, and shut up the house 7 days. And the priest shall come again the 7th day, and shall look, and behold, if the plague be spread in the wall of the house, then the priest shall command that they take away the stone in which the plague is, and they shall cast them into an unclean place without the city. And he shall cause the house to be, to be scraped within around about, and they shall pour out the dust that they scraped off without the city, into an unclean place. And they shall take another stone and put them in the place of those stones. And he shall take other mortar and shall plaster the house. And if the plague come again and break out in the house, after that he has taken away the stone, and after he has scraped the house, and after it is plastered, then the priest shall come and look, and behold, if the plague be spread in the house, it is a fettering leprosy in the house, it is unclean. And he shall break down the house, the stones of it, and the timber thereof, and all the mortar of the house, and he shall carry them forth out of the city unto an unclean place. Moreover, he that goeth into the house all the while that it is shut up shall be unclean until the even. And he that lieth in the house shall wash his clothes, and he that eateth in the house shall wash his clothes. And if the priest shall come in and look upon it, and behold, the plague has not spread in the house, after the house was plastered, then the priest shall pronounce the house clean, because the plague is healed. And he shall take to cleanse the house 2 birds and cedar wood and scarlet and hyssop. And he shall kill the one of the birds in an earthen vessel over running water. And he shall take the cedar wood and the hyssop and the scarlet and the living bird, and dip them in the blood of the slain bird, and in the running water, and sprinkle the house 7 times. And he shall cleanse the house with the blood of the bird, and with the running water, and with the living bird, and the cedar wood, and with the hyssop, and with the scarlet. But he shall let go the living bird out of the city unto an open field, and make an atonement for the house, and it shall be clean. This is the law of all manner of plagues of leprosy and scald, and the leprosy of a garment and of a house, and for a rising, and for a scab, and for a bright spot, to teach them it is unclean, and when it is clean, this is the law of leprosy.
Right.
Okay. A continuation, and it continues when they do enter the promised land, and the leprosy is in the house. This is how they are to address that. So continuation of leprosy and its procedure and how it should be treated.
Okay. All right, now the next part, I was just listening. This is the last part of Leviticus 15th chapter, verse 1 through 33. Defilement by discharge from sexual organs. Now, I was listening to a sermon just before Shabbat, and it kind of in our society today, we just really gone beyond in terms of sex and procreating. We've gone beyond what God has intended here in the Torah, and as a result, we're affected with all kind of diseases. And the minister who was preaching said that there's always if you misuse what God has made, then you will be affected by all kind of diseases if you're misusing what He has given you, such as engaging in promiscuity, engaging in homosexual sex. That you're going to your sexual organs were not designed to be to number one, to be promiscuous with 100 million people, and I'm exaggerating, of course. And your sexual organs were not designed to have same sex. There's no such thing as same sex anyway. If that it's your body's just not designed that way. And so here is what happens. Again, God gives the instructions of what's to happen, how the sexual organs are to be handled, what you're to do, and it's very specific. Starting at Leviticus 1:33. Barry, tell you what? Why don't you do the first 1:33? Do the first 10 verses, Barry. Verse 1 through 10. Then John, if you could do verse.
Which one? Chapter 15.
15, And then if you would do verse 11 through 20.
Okay.
Okay. So Barry, why don't you do 1 through 10?
And the Lord spake unto Moses and Aaron, saying, Speak unto the children of Israel, and say unto them, When a man hath a running issue out of his flesh, because of his issue, he is unclean. And this shall be his uncleansing and his issues, whether his flesh run with his issue, or his flesh be stopped from his issue. It is his uncleanness. Every bed whereon he layeth that hath the issue is unclean, and everything wherein he sitteth shall be unclean. And whosoever touches his bed shall wash his clothes, and bathe himself in water, and be unclean until the eve. And he that sitteth on anything whereon he sat that hath the issue shall wash his clothes, and bathe himself in the water, and be unclean until the eve. And he that touches the flesh of him that hath the issue shall wash his clothes, and bathe himself in the water, and unclean until the eve. And if he that hath the issue spit upon him that is clean, that he shall wash his clothes, and bathe himself in the water, and be unclean until the eve. And what saddles soever he rideth upon that hath the issue shall be unclean. And whosoever touches anything that was under him shall be unclean until the eve. And that beareth any of those things shall wash his clothes, and bathe himself in water, and be unclean until the eve.
Okay, thank you. John 11 through 20.
Okay. And whosoever he touches that has the issue, and has not rinsed his hands in water, he shall wash his clothes and bathe himself in water, and be unclean until the even. And the vessel of earth that he touches, which has the issue, shall be broken, and every vessel of wood shall be rinsed in water. And when he that has an issue is cleansed of his issue, then he shall number to himself 7 days for his cleansing, and wash his clothes, and bathe his flesh in running water, and shall be clean. And on the 8th day he shall take to himself 2 turtle doves or 2 young pigeons, and come before the Lord unto the door of the tabernacle of the congregation, and give them unto the priest. And the priest shall offer them, the one for a sin offering, and the other for a burnt offering. And the priest shall make an atonement for him before the Lord for his issue. And if any man's seed of copulation go out of him, then he shall wash all his flesh in water, and be clean until even. And every garment and every skin thereon is the seed of copulation shall be washed with water, and be unclean until even. The woman also with whom man has laid with seed of copulation, they shall both bathe themselves in water, and be unclean until even. And if a woman have an issue, and her issue in her flesh be blood, she shall be put apart 7 days, and whomever touches her shall be unclean until even. And everything that she lieth upon in her separation shall be unclean. Everything also that she sitteth upon shall be unclean.
Verse 21. Anyone who touches her bedding shall wash his clothes, bathe in water, and remain unclean until evening. And anyone who touches any object on which she has sat shall wash his clothes, bathe in water, and remain unclean till evening. Be it the bedding, or be it the object on which she has sat, on touching it he shall be unclean until evening. And if a man lies with her, her impurity is communicated to him. He shall be unclean 7 days, and any bedding on which he lies shall become unclean. When a woman has had a discharge of blood for many days, not at the time of her impurity, or when she has a discharge beyond her period of impurity, she shall be unclean as though at the time of her impurity. As long as her discharge lasts, she shall be unclean. Any bedding on which she lies while her discharge lasts shall be for her like bedding during her impurity, and any object on which she sits shall become unclean, as it does during her impurity. Whoever touches them shall be unclean. He shall wash his clothes, bathe in water, and remain unclean until evening. When she becomes clean of her discharge, she shall count off 7 days, and after that she shall be clean. On the 8th day she shall take 2 turtle doves or 2 pigeons, and bring them to the priest at the entrance of the tent of meeting. The priest shall offer the one as a sin offering, and the other as a burnt offering, and the priest shall make expiation on her behalf for her unclean discharge before the Lord. You shall put the Israelites on guard against their uncleanness, lest they die through uncleanliness by defiling my tabernacle which is among them. Such is the ritual concerning him who has a discharge, concerning him who has an emission of semen and becomes unclean thereby, and concerning her who is in menstrual infirmity, and concerning anyone, male or female, who has a discharge, and concerning a man who lies with an unclean woman. John, you want to start it off?
Well, this one seems very complicated and just kind of, gee, where do we go? What does these bodily fluids represent that a man is losing? I think it's partly he's losing part of himself. At least the it said issue. I don't think any did mention one about blood. Hers may be a little easier to think of because blood you can associate with life, and she's losing part of that. It's almost like a sacrifice is being offered. But when a man is losing bodily fluid, I'm thinking it has to do with him losing part of himself, his wholeness. He's not complete anymore. Especially with copulation, that's the potential of life.
Yes.
That he loses, and it's not going to become life. But I think it has to do more with he's not whole anymore, and that's what he's losing, and that needs to be repaired and realigned.
And even I think they said at times when you don't think there's semen in your bodily fluids, there is semen.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe it's saying that also. It says an issue. We assume it's a bad issue. It could be an issue, but in any case, sometimes it's a possibility of semen life, the potential for life that's being emitted out of that. So, but in any case, this is your sexual organs. I mean, and I think it hinges around life. Like you said, it's a part of him, whether that be his seed or with the woman that be the egg. There's a potential for life when that egg dies. Remember the woman with the issue of blood who touched Jesus' garment. Right. She'd had was bleeding for 20-some years or so. She'd been bleeding for a long time outside of her menstrual cycle. And it was coming through the sexual organs. So it has to do because, and then I think God kind of explains it here when he says, such is the ritual concerning him who has a discharge, concerning him who has an emission of semen and becomes unclean thereby, and concerning her who is in a menstrual infirmity, and concerning anyone male or female who has a discharge. No, it's the verse before that. You shall put the Israelites on guard against their uncleanness, lest they die through their uncleanness by defiling my tabernacle which is among them. That's the key. Right there. God is saying, if you have all of this uncleanness going on with your body, then you can't come near my tabernacle. That's not acceptable. Because for whatever reason, it's not acceptable. So
I was thinking also that the sex organs were used to propagate life. And for life to continue, the sex organ has to function properly. And this is pointing out some improper functions of the human body, and that the proper function of them is good, while the improper function of them, not that they did anything wrong. I'm not the guy. It didn't say how the guy had this emission or what caused it. At least not just yet. But this is the normal function of the continuation of life. Points to sex organs should be operating properly, and if they're not operating properly, then something's amiss. Something's not clean, and it has to be addressed.
Well, remember when David's son, I forgot which one.
Absalom slept with his sister, with his wife.
No, Judah. I'm sorry, Judah's son. He was supposed to perform the with Tamar. To make seed for her dead husband.
Right.
And the son spilled his seed on the ground. Well, didn't God? He died. He died for doing that.
2 in a row died.
Spilling his seed on the ground purposely.
Right.
So, if you put it in this context right there, there's again our society has watered down the meaning of what our sexual parts are supposed to do and be. Matter of fact, all of this is within the context of marriage. Certainly outside of the context of marriage, and you're doing all of this, then your organs aren't going to be functioning right. So, all right. Anything else?
No, that's all I have.
Okay. All right. Now let me make sure. We're getting close to where we're going to be in sync with Israel in the Torah readings. Let me make sure that I think we have one next week. No, we have two next week. Acharemot and Kodashim are the next two Torah portions. Acharemot. Okay, and that's from Leviticus 16th chapter verse 1 through 18th chapter verse 30, and Kodashim, Leviticus 19th chapter verse 1 through the 20th chapter verse 27, and it begins, וידבר אדוני אל משה אחרי מות שני בני אהרון בקרבתם לפני אדוני וימתו. The Lord spoke to Moses after the death of the two sons of Aaron who died when they drew too close to the presence of the Lord. And Kodashim, וידבר אדוני אל משה לאמור, דבר אל כל עדת בני ישראל ואמרת אלוהם, קודשים תהיו, כי קדוש אני אדוני אלוהיכם. The Lord spoke to Moses, saying, speak to the whole Israelite community and say to them, you should be holy, for I, the Lord your God, am holy. All right. Another thing I forgot to mention is the fact that we're still counting the Omer, and this is the 20th day of the counting the Omer, 20 and 21, and let's see, when let's see if this will give me the to tell you when. It should be pay section. Okay. And it looks like Lag BaOmer. Lag BaOmer would be May 3rd. And so Pentecost or Shavuot, the first day of Shavuot is the 20th of May, starting the evening of the 19th of May. So we're still counting the Omer up until Pentecost, the day of the giving of the Torah, also the day of the giving of the Holy Spirit is promised by Jesus in the New Testament. We've had quite a Parsha. We had two, so I think we did pretty good. Mm-hmm. Anything else?
No.
Okay.
Nothing else.
All right. Well, we'll end with the song just came into my mind, and you know the song, Bless the Lord, oh my soul. We'll sing that, and then we'll be finished with our Seder.
Not Seder.
I call it a Seder
You call it a
because it's
Seder?
like the Seder, the Shabbat Seder, because for the Passover Seder, we talked about the Seder, we outlined it, and then we had the meal, the Seder meal. And we done that tonight. We outlined it, the Parsha, we talked about it, and we had the Shabbat meal. I call it a Shabbat Seder.
Okay.
You thought I was completely off.
Not completely.
Okay. Bless the Lord, oh my soul, and all that is within me. Bless His holy name. Once again. Bless the Lord, oh my soul, and all that is within me. Bless His holy name. He has done great things. He has done great things. He has done great things. Bless His holy name. Bless the Lord, oh my soul, and all that is within me. Bless His holy name. Thank you. We bless you. We thank you for being here with us. And again, we've done as He has commanded us to do. We've observed the 7th-day Sabbath. We have we're meeting with Him for Him to tell us what He would like for us to do this coming week, and we are reading and studying His Word to find out what He requires of us. And we thank Him, and we ask Him to continue to bless us and keep us and lead us in the right path, because so many are off on the wrong path. And we just pray that He keep us on the right path, that we constantly are in His presence, that we stay on the path that He has set for us in the Torah, and that He give you peace for the Shabbat. He give you blessing. He store up for you what you will need for this coming week. And we just praise Him. We offer Him our we just offer Him us, and we thank Him. We bless Him. And we pray that you will have a good week, a Shavua Tov, and a Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat.
Shabbat Shalom.